Did I design my own DIY speaker and I'm going to talk about it? I don't know. Let's find out together. Sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk about a really awesome DIY speaker that you and your loved ones could make right now. Today's sponsors, Sith Audio audiophile troubleshooting illumination devices. Listen, we all know how hard it is to get behind a rack and find out just what's wrong with our hi-fi system. Is it an RCA? Is it a balanced cable? Is it an optical cable? Well, sometimes we just can't see because many of us are old and our eyesight has gone bad. That's why you need a Sith Audio audiophile illumination troubleshooting device. They're available online for $1,237. However, they are running a special right now where you can get 2 of them for $3,000. So go run on over to Sith Audio and pick up one of your audiophile illumination troubleshooting devices. They're not a flashlight. So the answer to the first question, did I design a DIY speaker, is no, I didn't. However, I did talk to one of my patrons, Nell Blanchard. Nell Blanchard has done various crossover upgrades for speakers like the Sony SSCS5, for the ELAC BS41, and I think he's working on one for the Emotiva BT1. Is that the right one? B1 Plus. Listen, these model numbers get confusing, and when you're dealing with the diminished capacity brain power that I have, it gets a little bit challenging. Anyway, he does some cool stuff. He has designed some other speakers as well, full speakers. This is kind of an iteration based on one of his previous speakers. So Neil and I were talking, I think it was last year around this time, and he has a transmission line speaker, and then he also uses a Lineam tweeter, which is kind of a ribbon tweeter, but the problem is you can't really get it anymore. So you have to go online and find them used or new old stock. So I said, hey, Neil, why don't you take that awesome speaker that you have, shrink it down, and then put a tweeter in there that, you know, is easily accessible. He said, okay, I'll try to figure it out. That was my entire involvement with the design process. Also, I said, hey, the drivers should be somewhat affordable. Anyway, Neil worked on it, and this is what he came up with. Again, that was the extent of my input. Take the one speaker you made, make it smaller, and then put in cheaper drivers that are easier to find. Bing! Here's the speaker. So this thing, while it is smaller than his previous speaker that he designed, it's not small. You can put it, you can get it. It's kind of like a bookshelf speaker, but a bit bigger. It's not quite as big as a floor standing speaker. Still a little bit larger than a bookshelf. Most bookshelves. Let's hope I don't damage my back when I pick up and I rotate. Okay, so this is the, I think it's the MT Mass Loaded Transmission Line 6. ML Transmission. MLTL 6. Again, my brain doesn't work very well. All right, you can see it's got a soft tone tweeter right there, and then a 6-inch woofer right there. These are both SB acoustic drivers, which are available from a variety of retailers. I think he got them, or yeah, Matasound is where we got them from. So this is about, I don't know, 7 or 8 inches wide, 21 inches tall, and then we're looking at probably, baby, 16 inches deep. So again, not a small speaker. If you look at the back, there's the exit of the transmission line. All right, so what is a transmission line? Well, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail because number one, I probably couldn't explain it anyway. It is a port that's not just a hole in the speaker somewhere, and it doesn't just have a port length. So there is, think about it as a labyrinth, a corn maze, if you will. So the mass of the air that's in the exit area of the maze makes it deeper, okay? So it's way more complicated than a port, makes the speaker go down much deeper, even below its FS resonant frequency. But the takeaway is most people don't make these. When I say people, I mean manufacturers. Most manufacturers don't make transmission line speakers because they're expensive. It's expensive to make the enclosures. If it wasn't expensive, more people would probably be making them. But when you're a DIYer like Nell Blanchard, you can do whatever you want to do. And he has a great design for a larger one. Was able to just kind of shrink it down and kept most of the things exactly the same. As far as frequency response, it goes down to 32 hertz in his room, flat, 32. That's bananas. Most tower speakers don't go that low. A speaker of this size that can go down to 32 hertz is crazy. I can't remember how high it goes on the top end. Sorry, my monitors just went blank. When my monitors go blank, it changes the lighting. I don't think you really care about that, do you? Let's talk about how it sounds. From a soundstage and imaging perspective, it's on par with just about any of the best speakers that I've heard, with the exception of maybe some coaxial designs, like the ELAC Unify 2.0. Pretty spectacular as far as imaging. All the Kefs, like when you have the tweeter and the mid-range right there, it's good. I'm not saying that this isn't great. It's awesome, but not as good as a coaxial. But we should, I don't know, be reasonable about our expectations. It's fantastic. It will disappear. It's also tuned in a way that makes it very easy to disappear from a soundstage and imaging perspective. It is not harsh, so you don't have to worry about like getting these towed in directly at you and really dialing in your setup for soundstage and imaging. So, soundstage and imaging, let's talk about the bass. So, I basically alluded to it earlier. The bass on this is absolutely outstanding. Probably the best bass that I've heard on a speaker, period. With the exception, and it's interesting because it's another DIY speaker. The bass on this bookshelf speaker is only rivaled by that of the CSS Audio Crichton 1TDX with the upgraded crossover kit. Both of these woofers are incredible. Both the enclosures on the Crichton and on Nell's speaker are larger, and of course Nell's is a mass-loaded transmission line, which means it's going to go even deeper. Both speakers have incredibly clean bass. If I was going to, so here's the deal. I don't have the Crichtons here anymore. I do have a pair of Crichtons. They are in various states of disassembly, though. So, takeaway is I don't have a working pair of Crichtons here. From memory, Nell's speaker's probably a little bit cleaner on the bottom. Don't get me wrong, they're both incredible. Nell's, though, has, well, it just goes deeper. The Crichton is rated, I think, anechoic to 40 in room. They say they go down to about 30. So it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen the other. They're close. I feel like Nell's is goes a little bit further down. I mean, tracks like Narcissistic Cannibal. I almost said Cannibal Corpse. Ooh, I don't think you all are ready for Cannibal Corpse. I'm not even ready for Cannibal Corpse. A little bit intense music. Narcissistic Cannibal, however, by Korn, at the 1 minute mark goes goes way down. Usually, I always need a subwoofer to get the last bit of that. Of course, on Nell's speaker, loud and clear. The bass is also not overpowering, which I think is really refreshing on a speaker like this. One of the I don't know, reservations I have about some speakers that have a lot of bass is, if they have a lot of bass, you're screwed if you're in a small room or in a room that doesn't maximize the actual output of that speaker. So when there's behaved bass, but deep bass and authoritative bass, I like that better, because you're not stuck with something that's going to be overpowering. Reason I like a subwoofer is because you can control the level of the bass. You're not going to need a subwoofer with these speakers. I think in most rooms, this speaker is going to do great. Maybe in the smallest of rooms, like not in this office. You want to put them out in a larger room. But for the most part, the bass is balanced enough that it's not going to overpower most rooms. Clean, clear, paper woofer, so tonality is very good. The bass on this speaker is absolutely sublime. Let's talk about mid-range. The funny thing is, the sound signature of this is kind of similar to the Crichton 1TDX. A little bit, I would say, a little bit warmer on the transmit mass loaded transmit MLTL 6. Yeah, a little bit warmer. Adele's voice on Hello was a little bit smokier. I don't hear the utmost of details in her voice, but that's okay. Leans a little bit warm. And I think it's because Nell wanted it that way. He says he used what's called a room curve. So it's not just completely flat. It actually is kind of, I don't know, tapers down at the top. So the bass is actually a little bit higher than the treble when it starts to fall off. That's another point. These are very efficient speakers. I think they come in around 89 dB efficiency, so you don't need a ton of power to drive these speakers. The mid-range is natural sounding, not incredibly detailed in comparison to a speaker like the Emotiva B2 Plus. But it's natural and it's balanced. I think the Crichton 1TDX is going to sound a little bit more detailed throughout the mid-range with vocals. You also have to remember that these drivers are really affordable drivers. So the speaker as a package is going to be more affordable than the Crichton 1TDX. And I think in some ways it beats the 1TDX. Let's talk about treble. Once again, I think treble is a little bit rolled off in comparison to the bass. Nell loves this tuning, and I get it. I think it's great. I personally like a little bit more detail around 10K and above. So if there's a little bit of a bump, 10K and above, I would be loving life. This would be like my perfect speaker. Now, the great thing is, well, Nell designed the crossover. So if he wants to put a bump in the 10K or above range, he certainly can. And I'm sure if you talk to him, he would design maybe something in there that would put it up there. I am not a completely flat, linear speaker guy. I like a little bit of spice up top sometimes. I like it a little bit different. Sometimes it's fun to be different. Top end does not lack clarity, but it is not as apparent. And the cymbals on Harvester of Sorrow were there. They sounded natural. They just sounded pretty step back in the mix in comparison to the rest of the instruments. But again, it is a speaker that's not going to offend you on the top end. And you can crank these things. The treble does come a little bit more in line the louder they go. I don't like to listen at super loud volumes though. So when I'm listening at 65 dB, 70 dB and below, I wish there's a little bit more pop on the treble. However, I can always use tone controls, which I did. So if you have tone controls or an EQ, I wouldn't worry about the stock sound signature or the way that he has the crossover design because, well, you can just use tone controls. So, what are my final thoughts? Final thoughts. I think this speaker is amazing. Nell does not sell kits. What Nell sells is the plans, the guide to the kits. So then you go out and buy the drivers, and then you buy the wood. However, I think he is working with somebody to maybe start making flat packs, which is going to be the wood that's cut up properly. Because with the transmission line speaker, a little bit more complicated than just making a box. But he gives you all the plans, all the cut lists, everything. Very, very, very detailed plans. Plans are $100. I think the driver components come in around $150 or below, so that's $250. And then you're probably going to need a sheet of Baltic birch. So let's say $100 for that. So $350, probably all in, if you're good at woodworking and you can put these together. Oh, crossover components. I don't remember how much those are. I think all in, you can probably get this speaker made for under $600. We're just talking parts. You're going to have to provide your own labor. As far as the crossover components, he uses all the good stuff, the stuff that... This is garbage! Garbage crossover sandcast resistors. Terrible. Okay, he uses stuff that some people would consider to be really, really good. Some people get really upset about cheap crossover components. I'm not going there. Anyway, great project that you and your kid can have. If you're after something that is going to pretty much smoke every other speaker that you have out there, with maybe the exception of the Crichtons, and you love bass from a small package, then I think this is the kit for you. I think you'll have a ton of fun putting it together. It's not too crazy complicated that I could probably do it. The cut list might get a little bit complicated for me, but I would probably take it to somebody and get the sheet of Baltic birch cut. You can also make it out of MDF, but if you make it out of MDF, you're going to have to paint it or you're going to have to veneer it. So, I don't know. Baltic birch is probably the easier way to go. But if you're a woodworking genius and you have a bunch of veneer laying around, well then, make it out of MDF or whatever you want to make it out of. I think 18 millimeters is the size that he uses. Extraordinary. I'll link Neil's website in the description. I'm not affiliated with him in any way. He is a patron and he is a friend. But Neil did not pay me to make this video. You should go check out his website, though. He's really talented. So if you want to support the channel, sign up for Patreon. Patreon.com/cheapaudioman. Patreon-only Zooms. Patreon-only Discord. Patreon-only Facebook group. You can also sign up for Amazon Music or Tidal Music. Links in the description. Click sign up even if you quit. I get a couple of dollars. You can use the thanks button down by the share button. Buy me a cup of coffee. But don't feel compelled to buy me anything. So don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu. Get your grandkids or your kids together. Go make yourself a DIY speaker and fill your soul with happiness. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.